Hello my loves, and thank you for joining me. It's Kirsten and it's of course time for my November wrap up, which this month I've read so much less than I normally would. Not in terms of the amount of books, because I've read 8 books, which is my average at the moment, but just in terms of the pages read, I've read 2,386, which is on average about 1,000 pages less than I normally would, which it is what it is. Honestly, that's mainly because I did a classics reading month. I really did enjoy this reading month. I will say I don't think I'm going to do a dedicated genre month again for a little while, just because I do find that if you start doing just one genre, tend to get a little bit bored of it. And so definitely for the next couple of months I'm going to mix it up, especially because going into winter I get rather miserable because it's all cold out and I just want to have a nice cozy TBR that's going to make my life really comforting when I go and read it. The classics I do enjoy, and some of these were very comforting. However, I do tend to read them a lot slower. That's why I read a lot less pages. Plus, Pokemon came out this month and yeah, let's just say that took over reading for a little while. Anyway, enough of the ramble. Let's get straight into the books that I've read. I do have one book that I'm carrying over, and that is the Iliad by Homer, and this is a war poem all about the Trojan War taking place in the 10th year of that war, and we are seeing how both sides are actually dealing with that. You have one side that's laying siege to Troy and trying to take back Helen, who was taken from them, and they've just been, honestly, that snub was just too much for their pride to take, so they've been laying siege for 9 years. But you're seeing the tensions high between these people of that sort of length of a siege. That's really interesting. I really like it. I also like how the gods are portrayed in this, how they have an influence in everything that's going on. I think it works really well. And then you have the other side of that where you see the Trojans and how some of them really don't agree with what Priam's done in taking Helen and refusing to give her back, even when he loses a fight, which he said that he would, if he lost, give Helen back and end this war, which he then refuses to do. So it's really interesting seeing all of that. I am on book 9 because this is separated by books. I do like it. However, I find it very repetitive. I want to be able to really enjoy this book without getting frustrated at the repetitiveness of it, because if you do it in small chunks, the repetitiveness makes sense, because all of this was told orally back then, and so I repeat myself a heck of a lot. I can just edit it out. However, back then that's not what you did, and also I think the repetitiveness adds to the lyricalness of this and adds to that storytelling vibe. So yeah, I do like it. It's just one that I have to read maybe just a few books every so often, rather than continuously all the time. Okay, so the books that I actually finished this month, we have Shirley Jackson's The Missing Girl. This came out as 2 stars, and this is a very small classic. It is actually filled with 3 short stories, which I was so surprised at, because this is literally just over 50 pages long, and I was like, you've managed to fit 3 stories in this? These 3 stories, they're all slightly different. So The Missing Girl is, as it says, a missing girl. However, it's really unusual and a bit bizarre because nobody seems to care that this girl has gone missing, and it makes you question whether the girl was even there in the first place. So it's very creepy and eerie, and all of the characters in here don't have proper names, so it's a little bit unsettling. The second book is all about a boy going on a train journey on his own, where he meets this lady that is actually running from the law, and it's just a really good adventure one. Honestly, that was probably my favourite. It was really quite wholesome. There wasn't anything too spooky to it. Obviously, at the end you can question whether any of this actually took place or whether it's just a child's imagination, but it was still a really kind of sweet one actually. And then the last one's called Nightmare, and it does read like a nightmare. It's very claustrophobic. It's all about this woman that is trying to deliver this package and instead is getting hounded, and that one is the most one where I was like, oh god, I don't actually like, it's so chaotic and claustrophobic, and I just couldn't make sense of it. And even at the end I was still a bit like, wait, what just happened? What did I just read? Overall, I'm intrigued by Shirley Jackson's writing style, which is what these pocket classics are for. However, did I actually enjoy all of these? No, and hence the 2 stars. Then we have the only 3-star book, and that was Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky. This is a Russian classic, and we are following our main character as he is having a bit of a conflict inside him as to the way society works, the social constructs of society. And our main character is someone that has dropped out of university. He lives in poverty, and all the characters you meet all live in poverty, and it does a really good depiction of that. It also does a really good depiction of mental health and the fact that our main character is contemplating committing a crime because he believes he can get away with it, because he believes that people who are higher and have more to add to society can do whatever they need to do to make that possible, even if it includes murdering someone. However, once he's actually done this murder, he then starts flickering between remorse for what he's done and then not caring. And it's just this continual breakdown of his psyche, and he was never very mentally stable at the beginning when he was just thinking about doing this crime. I can appreciate it for the literary part of what it brought to books and what you can actually dissect from this. So if it was a literary criticism, I needed this for an essay, yes, 100% really good for that. However, for an simple, I want to sit down and read and enjoy a book, no. It was far too chaotic for me, and everything was so over dramatic, over the top all the time. I just couldn't keep up with it. Some of it is funny in places, like it's got a very black humour to it, but there are some depictions, like a scene with a horse, that I couldn't. I had to put it down. I really, really didn't like it, and that just kind of set the bar on how much I didn't like this book. But it got the 3 stars because I can understand everything it's actually done, all the things it talks about with social constructs, everything like that. I mean, it's very well written, I just personally didn't enjoy it. Then we get into the 4 stars, which there was a lot of 4 stars, and the book that I'm going to talk about next was a contender for Book of the Month, I'm not going to lie, and that is Ariadne by Jennifer Saint. I really enjoyed this book. This is a Minotaur retelling. We are following the Minotaur's sister Ariadne, and she is dealing with the fact that she has a Minotaur for a brother and doesn't like the fact that her father is taking tribute from Athens to feed this Minotaur, and that's how he rules, with just a hard grip of fear and anger and using the Minotaur to fuel this. But instead of having the usual perspective of it from Theseus and his whole I've slayed the Minotaur and I'm a hero and everything, you actually see it from the female's perspective in this, which I think is amazing because females get such a hard rap, especially in mythology. Like, it's dreadful, and they even talk about things like Medusa and just how women are constant playthings for gods to reenact retribution upon man, or even just for men to enact their retribution when they are frustrated and fed up, and just how women constantly get used throughout mythology. I really, really liked this. I would say if you're a fan of Circe, you're going to absolutely love this. We end up following both sisters, and it's really interesting to see how both sisters develop, how everything changes for them, and just the mythology part of this was really good. Beautiful imagery. I don't want to say too much about it because I enjoyed it so much that I'm a bit hesitant to actually give too much away, but it's steeped in mythology and I loved it. Loved hearing the different stories about it, which gave me those Circe vibes. I will admit it does slow down in the middle, which is why it missed off that 5-star mark. It does slow down, but I still really enjoyed this story, and it's made me so intrigued to read anything else Jennifer Saint comes out with, as well as reading other books from women's perspectives to do with mythology. They do always get a bad rep, like for instance Medusa, which you do hear her story, but it's not the main focus of this book, and about how she was cursed because she was raped. And that's like ridiculous, and that's the part that people don't focus on. They just focus on the fact that she's a monster, not the fact that she was this innocent young girl and was just caught an eye of a god who decided that he wanted her and took her against her will, and as a result a goddess cursed her for it. Like, it's ridiculous and it's spiteful, and that is how women have to deal with life. And I think it does a really good job of explaining all of that in this, and it, like I said, makes me intrigued to see things and other books from that sort of perspective. Then we have a book that was just a pure comfort book, and I really did enjoy it, and that's Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. This book did not do anything new. So I've read quite a few Jane Austen books and they all kind of follow the same sort of path, and Sense and Sensibility did not do anything new at all. But I really liked it, and it was so comforting because it felt like I already knew these characters. It felt like I already knew this storyline. That is something that I like. I mean, I'm a rereader. I like things like that. I find it really nice and comforting just to relax and read a book where you already know those characters. So this, even though they were new characters, because I already knew where this was going to go, knew the plot line, knew the writing style, it was that just relaxing, comforting book. And in this one, we're following a family whose grandfather has basically left them out the will because he's decided that everything he owns can go to his son, yes, but then his son has to carry it down through his first marriage and his son, leaving his second marriage's children, who are all girls, high and dry. They've got nothing. And so they move into the countryside and get a quaint little cottage that they can afford and live quite a frugal life. But then, of course, the girls are growing up. They're getting, they're going out, trying to make their way in the world in terms of like meeting men and getting married and things like that. And you're just seeing these two love stories and how they're very similar love stories, but how both sisters deal with it very, very differently. And it was just lovely. I mean, it's a Jane Austen book. I expected the romance, I expected some of the sarcastic humour in this, and I did expect the ending, but I still really enjoyed it, even though it was so predictable. As I said, it was really nice to relax to and come back to a writing style that I do enjoy. Then we have William Shakespeare's Macbeth, and I did say it in my vlog and I'm going to say it again. I mainly reread this because I'm pretty sure I read this for my GCSEs way back when, but because I read Foul is Fair by Hannah Cappin, and that is a Lady Macbeth retelling, that's what piqued my interest to actually reread this because I couldn't remember too much of the story. This was really good. I really enjoyed it. It was a really, really quick read. It seems like a longer book than what it actually is, but the play itself is only 90 pages long, and it's just so good. I loved seeing how much William Shakespeare has influenced so much of our literature and culture today, and I thought that was brilliant, and I think that's why I enjoyed it as much as I did. If I didn't take that from it, if I didn't take those connections to Foul is Fair and honestly other literature and things like that, I don't think I would have enjoyed it as much. But because I could make all of those connections, that's what gives it that extra star to make it 4 stars in my opinion, because I just had such a good enjoyment of making those connections. The actual play itself is all about Macbeth, who sets about killing different people goaded on by his wife and these 3 witches. He then comes to regret his actions and it ends in a war and he dies. The actual plotline of this is quite good, and I loved the scenes with the witches in it. They were my absolute favourite, and even the war towards the end, you got the chaoticness of it all. Everything else was just okay. It's actually really readable. This version of it is really readable because they changed some of the wordings just to the modern day spelling, but they do have an index at the back of what they changed and what it was originally. So it's made it really readable, and yeah, as I said, I personally enjoyed this because of the connections I could make to other books. So yeah. Okay, then we have a book that was the first classic I read this month, and chaos. I just don't even know where to start with this, and that is The Monk by Matthew Lewis. This is... let me start at the beginning. I picked this up because I was interested in Gothic literature, and this one kept popping up whenever I was doing research into Gothic literature, saying it is one of the best, one of the forefathers. I mean, there's so many classics that are like, well, this one influenced this one and stuff. I think they all influenced each other in some way. So I thought, you know what, let me pick this up. It's all about a monk that has been devout for 30 years of his life, has constantly deprived himself of everything, has barely even stepped outside the monastery, and then instead he gets influenced to leave that behind and follow this path of debauchery, and it ends up with him trying to rape a girl. And he gets infatuated by her, and by the end of the book, the realisation of who that girl actually is, it's a lot worse, you know. I mean, the act itself is atrocious, but the spin that it took, I didn't expect, because I thought it was already quite bad enough as it is without having that added twist at the end. But in this book, you're not following just that. You're actually having many different stories told at once, and you're seeing all these different characters, all their different histories and pasts. And this book very much demonizes Christianity and makes religion the evil person and the reason why these evil acts are happening. And it also devalues love as well, and just how love is also a villain at times in this, and how love can twist into things like hate and jealousy and the actions because of that. There is also a ghost story in this. Like, there's a lot going on, and it's not something where you can follow just the monk's storyline. There are chapters where it deviates from that and takes you down a completely different path, completely different story that eventually links back up, but not in the way you would expect. So it's one that I can just say, I was so hard pushed as to where to put this rating, but it is one that I'm going to think about, that I can honestly never not really think about, because of the fact that it was so unusual, and you can take so much from this. You can go into it with so many different thoughts and you'll still find something to back up each different argument. And it was just, I mean, it was really well done, really confusing, really chaotic, and did make me go, what the hell, at many points in this. But yeah, I mean, it's one that if you are interested in Gothic literature, is one that I would recommend, because you can see a lot of influence again on other books from this book, and the scandals and stuff. Like, if you think about when this was actually written, the topics it was actually talking about, I'm not surprised that it got such a bad rep at the start and was trying to be taken out of print because of what it was doing. So yeah, it was one that I can honestly say, even my thoughts aren't cohesive about it, because this book is not cohesive. So okay, the last 4 stars was The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Anne Bronte. This is a book that I really did enjoy. Anne Bronte is the only one of the Bronte sisters I hadn't read at least one book by, and I was intrigued by this one because it's all about this female that has moved into Wildfell Hall in this quaint little town, and she has a very mysterious past, and so people start coming up with slanderous gossip about her. And our main character, who is actually writing a letter, says that at first he thought that she was very rude, but then he made an effort to actually get to know her, and when he uncovered her past, it shocked him what she had actually had to deal with. And that is because she was running away from her husband, her drunk husband, who was so degrading all the time, and yet she tried being the devout Christian wife, tried being there for him to actually try and pull him back onto the right path and raise her son and do the good wifely thing that it was seen back then. However, she just couldn't. It got to a point where she's like, I just cannot do this anymore, and so she ran away, which was not allowed back then, because when you marry, you are now the property of your husband, and so is your child. And the fact that she runs away with her child as well was just a massive scandal back then. And you're just following this story. So you have the first bit of the book, which is all from the male's perspective, where he's writing this letter about how he first met this lady. And then when he gets her story, she has given it to him in her journal, and then that's what you then see. So it switches perspective into her perspective, and you're getting the journal entries from when she was young and she first met her husband to when she had moved away. And I think it's a really interesting story to look through everything that she's dealt with, the way she starts off with being so hopeful to by the end of that period, and also all the things that she's actually had to put up with because this man cannot stop drinking, and how he just degrades her and finds fault with everything she does. And then you have the end of the book, which is wrapping up the letter, and it's got a slightly happier ending, which is very nice. But I think it was a really good look into what women had to put up with back then, the fact that women did used to be owned by men and that they had no life, and if you wanted to do something for yourself and not get married and have children, then you were shunned by society, that it was seen as ridiculous, and also just marriage in general, that you're not allowed to choose, that it was basically chosen for you, and if you were proposed to, then you were stupid for saying no, even if you didn't like the person. And it caused a lot of that into it, and as a modern day reader reading this, I was just so outraged for our main character so often throughout this book, and not just our main character but some of the other characters and what they have to put up with. I'm just like, So yeah, it does a really good job of exploring different things. It is a little bit hard to read in places because of the degradation that our main character has to deal with. I think it is really impactful, really important, and brings up a lot about what women have actually had to deal with. So yeah. Okay, and the last book of the month, and my favourite book of the month, it was 5 stars, and that's Come Tumbling Down by Shauna Maguire. This is the 5th book in the Wayward Children series, and it's a series that I absolutely love and is just comforting to me. So this is a fantasy portal series where we are following different children that have found their homes in different worlds, such as Alice going into Wonderland, and it's all about what happens when they come back. And in this one we are following Jack and Jill, who you first meet in the very first book, Every Heart a Doorway. You then meet them again in the 3rd book, which is a prequel to where they found their home, which is on the moors, and the fact that it's got, you know, Dracula influence and Frankenstein influence, and the fact that these two opposing forces are always against each other, and Jack and Jill end up on opposite sides of this. And then you have Come Tumbling Down, which is following Jack and Jill once again, because Jack's come back to the school to recruit her friends into helping her save the moors because of something that Jill has done. I really like this. These are all books that are all about being unapologetically yourself and doing the things that you believe are right, and not trying to be pushed into conforming into other people's versions of what is right. So Jack in this has extreme OCD, and she has been put into Jill's body, and although they're twins, she is freaking out because she cannot be comfortable and she doesn't feel like herself in her own body. And a lot of people are arguing and saying, you know, but you're twins, you should just be able to get on with this. And a lot of her friends are then going, no, you do not get to tell her that she can be fine. If she is telling you she's uncomfortable in her own skin, that she needs her body back and needs to be able to identify with herself, then that's what we need to do. And I really liked that, and we have a lot of different representation in this book, from transgender to gay, bisexual, honestly, you name it, it's got it. And I think it does such a good job at lifting those voices up and being like, it's okay to feel however you feel, and it's not okay for people to tell you that you should just conform to what society thinks of you. And I think that's brilliant, and that's what I love about this. And the fact that it has got horror fantasy influences, which is always a favourite of mine. The fact that they are so short, they're all 200 pages long, so they're really nice quick reads. Yes, they are heavy-handed, and a lot of people have complained at the fact that Shauna Maguire does kind of beat you around the head with some of these like things where she's trying to get the point across. However, it's a short book and I don't mind it, and I think the things that she's getting across are important. So I personally, I don't mind that, but I know that is a complaint a lot of people have. I still love this world. I still love all our different characters and the way they are also different, and yeah, I think it's great. I really enjoy this. But there we have it. Those are all the books that I've read in November. It was kind of funny to me that the 2 non-classics were my 2 favourite books of the month, but overall I still really enjoyed this classics reading month. It definitely opened me up to some very different classic books, and honestly some very strange things going on in those books. But it was a good time. Like I said, I don't think I'm going to do a full dedicated classics month like that again. I will definitely always have a classic book to read because I do love the writing, but I think a full month of it definitely slowed me down. So let me know what your favourite book of the month has been. Leave a little book stack emoji if you've managed to get this far. And yeah, if you have enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it that thumbs up, subscribe, comment to let me know that you're here. Social media links will be linked below, and I will of course catch you in the next one.